The legendary Dracula died in poverty, paying the price until his very last breath. In the end, he had nothing left, nothing but the Dracula cape that defined him and destroyed him. This is the story of the man who rewrote film history, a man who was once the immortal Dracula, once the greatest nightmare ever to haunt Hollywood's silver screen, but was swallowed whole by the very glamour, excess, and decadence that promised him immortality. This is a story not everyone has the courage to tell. A story about Béla Lugosi, the man who became the darkness and was eventually consumed by the darkness within himself. Backstory: the boy who came from Europe's shadows. Before the world knew the name Béla Lugosi, there was a boy named Béla Ferenc Dizzo Blasco, born in 1882 in a small Hungarian town swallowed by poverty. He grew up with nothing, no privilege, no formal education, just the harsh reality of a working-class family struggling to survive. He left school early, wandering from job to job, each one darker and harsher than the last, even descending into the mines where the world was nothing but dust, sweat, and endless blackness. But in that darkness, one thing glowed like a desperate spark: acting. The stage became the only door leading out of the life that tried to bury him. He found refuge in local theater, then in the bustling performance scene of Budapest, where he climbed, slowly, stubbornly, from anonymous extra to respected stage actor. He even entered the silent film world, his sharp features and haunting presence already carving a place for him. Then World War I erupted. Lugosi fought on the front lines and was badly wounded, injuries that would haunt him for decades, both in body and in mind. The war didn't just leave scars, it planted the seeds of the pain that would later drive him into morphine's embrace. This was the beginning of a man shaped by hardship, forged by shadows, and destined, without knowing it, to become the embodiment of darkness itself. The escape to America. When the war ended, Hungary fell into chaos, political upheaval, fear, and violent purges. For Béla Lugosi, staying meant death or disappearance. So he fled, first to Germany, then across the Atlantic, chasing a fragile hope called America. But America didn't open its arms to him. He arrived with no English, no money, and no place in a Hollywood that worshipped perfect accents and polished faces. He went from stage star in Europe to a nobody in the New World, taking whatever tiny roles he could find, sleeping in cheap boarding rooms, living off crumbs of work that barely kept him afloat. Yet even in the shadows, he never blended in. There was something about him, that aristocratic posture, the hypnotic eyes, the mysterious, almost otherworldly aura. He didn't fit in, but that strange quality would soon become the very thing that changed his destiny. The world wasn't ready for Béla Lugosi yet, but darkness was gathering, and a role was waiting for him, a role that would define his entire life. The moment that changed everything, Dracula, 1931. Before the cameras ever rolled, Dracula was just a stage role, a character Béla Lugosi had been performing on Broadway night after night, slowly hypnotizing American audiences with something they had never seen before. His portrayal was unlike anything at the time. Eyes that pierced straight through you, a rich Eastern European accent that felt both seductive and dangerous, and movements so slow, so deliberate, they felt almost supernatural. He didn't play Dracula, he became Dracula. When Universal Studios decided to bring the vampire to the big screen, no one else could stand in his shadow. His presence was too powerful, too unforgettable. And then it happened. 1931, Dracula hit theaters and the world changed. Audiences were terrified, fascinated, obsessed. Béla Lugosi didn't just star in a movie. He redefined the entire horror genre. He became the gothic idol of a generation, the man who brought darkness to life, the blueprint Hollywood would spend the next 100 years copying. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that this moment, this explosion of fame, was a double-edged sword. The role that made him immortal was also the role that would trap him forever. The Curse of Dracula, a star trapped in one role. Dracula made Béla Lugosi a legend, but it also became the prison he could never escape. After the film's explosive success, Hollywood sealed his fate. To every producer, every director, every studio head, he was the vampire. Nothing more, nothing less. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how many times he begged for a different role, Hollywood kept him locked inside the coffin it had built for him. He wasn't offered leading roles outside horror. He wasn't given a chance to show his range. He was typecast so brutally that even his talent couldn't break free. He once said, with a voice heavy with heartbreak, "I am not Dracula. I am an actor." But to Hollywood, those words didn't matter. The curse had already taken hold. The downfall. Morphine, pain, and desperation. The war had left scars beyond the battlefield. A lifetime of injuries, especially a crippling back wound, plagued Béla Lugosi long after the guns fell silent. Doctors prescribed morphine and methadone to ease the pain, a small relief that would grow into a lifelong chain. What began as medicine soon became addiction. Morphine became both companion and captor, slowly gnawing at his body, his mind, his very soul. Meanwhile, Hollywood's doors were closing, roles became scarce. His once brilliant career crumbled, his spirit unstable and fragile. Personal life offered no refuge. Multiple divorces, a fractured family, and endless instability followed him like a shadow. To survive, he accepted humiliating, low-budget roles, working with the likes of Ed Wood, a far cry from the grandeur of Dracula. The press had no mercy. They mocked him mercilessly, calling him a relic of Hollywood's golden age, a ghost of the man who had once terrified and captivated the world. Béla Lugosi was trapped, caught between the fame he could never escape and the despair he could never outrun.
The Untold Story. Public Rehab. In 1955, Béla Lugosi made a decision that shocked Hollywood. He voluntarily checked in to a rehabilitation center for his morphine addiction publicly. At a time when stars hid every flaw, every weakness, Lugosi chose honesty over secrecy. He admitted to the world that the man who had terrified millions as Dracula was in private, struggling with pain, dependency, and despair. The media were stunned. Headlines shifted from ridicule to curiosity, and slowly the public began to see him not as a fading relic, but a human being grappling with demons far darker than any Dracula role he had ever played. For a brief, fleeting moment, Hollywood offered him a shred of respect, a recognition long overdue for the actor who had redefined horror cinema. Colleagues whispered words of admiration. Some even expressed guilt for having allowed the industry to trap him in a single role. But the truth was harsh and inescapable. It was far too late. Years of addiction, relentless typecasting, and physical pain had taken their toll. His body was worn, his finances depleted, and his once brilliant career had crumbled into fragments. Even courage, honesty, and public acknowledgement could not restore the years lost. Still, this act of vulnerability, his courage to confront his own darkness publicly, remains one of the most poignant and human moments in Hollywood history. A reminder that even legends carry the weight of shadows unseen. Death in poverty and Hollywood's most unusual funeral. In 1956, the life of Béla Lugosi came to a heartbreaking end. A heart attack struck him down in a small, dilapidated apartment, far from the glamour, the applause, and the bright lights that once celebrated him as the immortal Dracula. There was barely enough money to cover a funeral. No grand ceremony, no stars in attendance, just the bare minimum to lay him to rest. Yet even in this final, desperate moment, the world could not forget Dracula. The caretakers, searching for something worthy for the man who had haunted millions, found it in his Dracula costume. Not because it was Lugosi's wish, but because it was the only beautiful thing he still possessed. So Béla Lugosi was buried in the very outfit that had made him famous, that had both elevated him to legend and trapped him in a lifelong prison of fame. The irony was cruel. The man who once commanded fear, who could silence a room with a single hypnotic glance, died alone, impoverished, and largely forgotten. Hollywood was stunned. The legend of Dracula had survived the years, but its creator had vanished into solitude. Béla Lugosi's death was more than an end. It was a haunting reminder that even immortals, in the flesh, are not immune to the shadows that chase them through life. The legacy. Dracula, immortal. Though Béla Lugosi's life was filled with tragedy, addiction, and heartbreak, his portrayal of Dracula lives on, eternal, untouchable, and iconic. His interpretation of the vampire became the definitive standard for every Dracula that followed. Every gesture, every hypnotic gaze, every slow, deliberate movement set a blueprint that Hollywood and the world still study and emulate nearly a century later. Lugosi's Dracula inspired hundreds of films, countless comic books, and innumerable video games. He transcended the silver screen to become a Gothic cultural icon, a symbol of mystery, allure, and the dark elegance of horror itself. Hollywood, which once confined and dismissed him, now looks back with reverence. Directors such as Tim Burton and Guillermo del Toro have called him the soul of cinematic darkness, acknowledging that Lugosi's influence permeates every corner of horror filmmaking. Though his life was marred by tragedy, his spirit continues to haunt screens, stories, and imaginations worldwide. A reminder that true legends never die. They only grow stronger in the collective memory of the world. Public reaction and global recognition. In the decades following his death, the world began to fully appreciate Béla Lugosi's unparalleled impact on cinema. Critics hailed him as the father of modern horror, recognizing that his performance in Dracula did more than entertain. It redefined the very language of fear on screen. The subtle menace in his gaze, the hypnotic cadence of his voice, the elegance of his movements, all became benchmarks that generations of filmmakers would study and emulate. Fans, refusing to let his memory fade, created shrines and museums dedicated to the man who had brought darkness to life. Annual commemorations celebrated his legacy, keeping the legend of Dracula alive in hearts across the globe. Hollywood, once dismissive and cruel, now looks back with awe. Directors such as Tim Burton and Guillermo del Toro have called him the soul of cinematic darkness, acknowledging that Lugosi's influence permeates every corner of horror filmmaking. Though his life was marred by tragedy, his spirit continues to haunt screens, stories, and imaginations worldwide. A reminder that true legends never die. They only grow stronger in the collective memory of the world. Béla Lugosi have wanted a comeback. Even at the lowest point of his life, Béla Lugosi never lost hope. During his time in rehab, he made a simple yet profound declaration. I want to act again. I want to be respected. Those words were more than a plea. They were a desperate, heartfelt longing. A man who had terrified and enthralled millions, who had once stood at the pinnacle of Hollywood, still dreamed of reclaiming a fragment of the glory and dignity that had been stripped away from him. It was a comeback dream born from years of being trapped in a single role, from the relentless mockery, typecasting, and the cruel isolation of fame's shadow. But it was pure, sincere, and deeply human. Even as morphine drained his body and the weight of his past mistakes pressed on him, the spark of ambition remained. Lugosi's desire to return to the screen was not born of vanity or greed. It was born of the undying fire of an artist who refused to let his talent and spirit fade into obscurity. The priceless lesson of fame and fortune. Lugosi's story tells a haunting tale that glittered with stardom, but hid shadows deeper than anyone could see. He had it all, or so it seemed. Global recognition, a place in Hollywood history, wealth, and the power to terrify and captivate millions. Yet fame and fortune proved to be a two-edged sword, shaping him into a legend while simultaneously chaining him to a single role, a single identity, a single story, Dracula. The very glamour that elevated him also isolated him. The applause that once echoed in theaters was replaced by whispers of mockery and typecasting. The bright lights of Hollywood cast long, unforgiving shadows that magnified his struggles, addictions, and heartbreak. Lugosi's story teaches us a painful truth. Success, fame, and wealth are fleeting when they are built without freedom and self-respect. They can lift you to the highest peaks, but also leave you stranded, exhausted, and alone when the applause fades. Even the immortal Dracula could not save him from the very human vulnerabilities of pain, loneliness, and longing. In the end, the man behind the legend paid the ultimate price for his dream, a life of brilliance shadowed by suffering, a cautionary tale for anyone who chases fame without balance, and a reminder that the glory of the stage can never replace the peace of the soul. Béla Lugosi gave the world darkness, allure, and terror, but he also left a lasting lesson. The higher you rise, the steeper the fall, and the cost is always more than you imagine.
The haunting legacy of Béla Lugosi. He entered Hollywood like darkness slipping into a sunlit room. There, he became Dracula. And yet, it was the very same place that would take everything from him. But if Dracula is immortal, then so too is Béla Lugosi. He may have died in solitude, but his legend, his shadow over cinema, over Gothic culture, over the imagination of generations will never fall. His story is a reminder: fame can build you into a god or trap you in the darkness of your own making. Béla Lugosi lived the brilliance and the pain, and through it all, he became eternal. If you've been captivated by the life and legend of Béla Lugosi, hit that subscribe button and join us as we dive deeper into the stories of Hollywood's most haunting icons. Leave a comment below. Which part of Lugosi's life moved you the most?